everyone. Thanks for joining Jeff and I today. Today we're going to get into a little bit about leveraging. But before we do, I just wanted to mention that I was lucky enough to go to the Rush concert on Friday night. First concert they've had in what, like a decade? Long time since they lost one of their drummer. And they ended up replacing their drummer. It took them years, but they found a European girl. I think she's from Germany. And let me tell you, she did a phenomenal job. It was
Ah,
fantastic.
and
I
that
have
was
a
it.
new respect for Rush. They're fantastic musicians.
Yeah, Geddy Lee is
Anyway,
always um, right behind the home plate at the Blue Jays games.
okay. Well,
Yeah, I
that's
think
good.
I believe he lives in Yorkville. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Close to home. Okay. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to get into a bit about margin and investing. So margin occurs when you borrow, I guess, to buy securities. And sometimes there's an upside and sometimes there's a downside. As Warren Buffett quoted a long time ago, if you're smart, you don't need it. And if you're dumb, you shouldn't be using it.
Yep.
So we can get into an example of that, the upside and downside. If you purchase a security on margin, you are facing, if the market turns down, you're facing a loss. So depending on how much it drops will determine how much you lose plus interest. So whatever the interest is at that time. So there is a downside to this, but if the markets are up, then it's a win. So why don't we get into a little bit of the situational awareness about forced liquidation?
Yeah, so this was a hedge fund that recently had to sell most of its positions at a discount because they were margined. Its founder was an OpenAI researcher. He's in his 20s, and he was leveraged 4 to 1, which meant that for each dollar of capital his clients gave him, he was borrowing an extra, $4. So his exposure to the market was significantly higher than his capital. And so if you're leveraged 4 times to 1, that means that if the market pulls back 25%, you've lost 100% of your equity.
Hmm.
And that's about almost what happened to him. So in July, most of his bets were tied to the AI trade. He had a lot of the chip and memory stocks. It pulled back. The Nasdaq was actually only down about 3%, but because of the leverage he was using, his fund ended up losing about 67% of its value in July. When you're margined and the value of your securities drop, you have two options. You can either put more cash into your account, or you have to sell your positions. In his case, he was receiving margin calls, and so rather than start doing a forced sale on all these stocks, he had to shop the company around. So he ended up selling all of his public equities to Citadel's uh, or Ken Griffin Citadel for a 10% discount on all the securities. So that is what happened with situational awareness. They had leverage 4 times to 1, and then they saw a 67% drop in the value of their equity in just 1 month.
Mm.
There's another good example from the 1990s, which is long-term capital. They were even worse. They were leveraged 25 times to 1. And this company had about 16 people, all incredibly smart people with hundreds of millions of dollars. And I believe two of them were Nobel Prize laureates. So very smart, intelligent people. They were leveraged 25 times to 1, and they were trying to make money on these thin bond spreads. Anyways, what happened was Russia defaulted on some of its debt. The ruble got devalued, and then it basically blew up their company. And it was so bad that the Federal Reserve actually had to intervene to prevent a huge market disruption. So both situations are very similar. They used leverage. There was a pullback in the market, and they ended up losing everything. So that's what happened in those two situations.
Yeah. So sometimes margin works and sometimes it doesn't. So we come forward to today. It's interesting too that the total amount of margin debt outstanding as of June looks like 1.5 trillion outstanding in margin debt, roughly 49% higher than the year before. So
Yeah, it's
it's interesting because there's a couple other things too, like in the March 2000, the dot-com bubble, there was a debt, I guess margin debt was up to about 82.5%. And then in year over year in July 2007, margin debt was up almost 46 compared to the year before. So it's constant fluctuation depending on what's going on.
yeah. We talked about this last week in the topic, are we in a bubble? We concluded we're not in a bubble, but the margin debt is a big concern because anytime you see a large percentage increase in margin borrowing, it doesn't take much to have a lot of that money come out. Because if the market pulls back a few percentage points, all these people are going to get margin calls and they're going to have to sell their stocks. So that causes a larger correction in equity prices. So this is something we're concerned about it, and we're going to keep an eye on the margin debt for sure. We don't margin for our clients. We've found that a lot of people will overestimate their risk profile. They think that their risk tolerance or risk capacity is much higher than it actually is. And
Hmm.
it's one thing to say you can stomach a 5-10% drop in your portfolio, but when it actually happens, that's usually when I get a much better idea of who has a higher risk tolerance
Right.
for their stocks. So yeah, we don't margin. We wouldn't do it if somebody asked us
No.
to.
Hmm.
What we do to manage risk is that we'll have several dozen stocks in everybody's portfolio, and each no stock will be so large that it completely determines the outcome of the return. We're properly diversified. We have representation in all the sectors, and that's been a good formula for success.
Yeah. So that's how we leverage the market.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay. I think
All
we
right,
covered everything.
I believe so.
Thanks, Jeff.